The LRM Carrier, the premier DPS support vehicle. And what exactly is the purpose of the LRM Carrier? The purpose of the LRM Carrier is to take a beautiful scene like this and transform it into a beautiful scene just like this. Oh yeah, I like the improvement. The LRM Carrier is actually a family of weapons platforms. It's not just LRMs. The other variants are things like the SRM Carrier, and there's also MRM carriers and even the Ac2 Carrier and the Ac2 LBX Carrier. These are all actually, I consider these all the same vehicle, just with different mounts. Now, I've discussed the LRM Carrier before, such as against a Locust or against a Demolisher, and I've hinted at its capabilities in battles against assault mechs. But my favorite mixed force is something like the longbows and archers and LRM carriers with a scout. Let's briefly go through the variants and then we'll discuss its actual performance. The classic LRM carrier for 3025 actually predates the Star League and even the Ares conventions. It's one of the original weapons from the 2200 age. After a brief period of Lost Tech losses, it gets an upgrade in 3055 to include a C3 Slave and Artemis. The Word of Blake Jihad era version has the improved C3. And then the MRM version is basically just as it is, it speaks for itself. The heavy LRM Carrier adds an extra LRM 20 and puts it all on a turret, but it has a serious problem. It doesn't have any extra ammo, and the LRM Carrier's main weakness is lack of ammo. You only get 8 full shots from all your LRM racks. So on the heavy, it basically translates down to only 6 full shots, which is kinda skimpy. You have to be careful with your shots to only take the ones that'll hit. The SRM Carrier is meant to be an ambusher, but personally I don't like it as much as the Hetzer. The main feature of the SRM Word of Blake is its improved C3, which, if you looked at my C3 Networks video, is a significant improvement. The SRM Guardian allows you to actually hide it in a building without getting detected, which is its main purpose anyway. Now on Sarnath, there's a list that includes an MRM carrier as an alternate to the SRM and the LRM carrier, but within the LRM carrier there's a variant that's called the LRM Carrier MRM variant. I think they're actually the same vehicle, but I've listed it twice because I wanted to play with the armor distribution a little bit. The Ac2 Carrier is very similar to the Ac2 version of the Partisan, except it has 5 Ac2s and less armor. And the Ac2 LBX is just that, which is a lot better at shooting down VTOLs. Now, there is no discussion of the LRM Carrier that's complete without also talking about the Demolisher. The Demolisher is the natural mate to the LRM Carrier. Everything the LRM Carrier lacks, the Demolisher has, and vice versa. Okay, so let's see how these different LRM Carrier variants do. Now, before we do that, first consider the following. An LRM Carrier is a piece of art, just like a Hanzo sword. You don't really compare a Hanzo sword with another Hanzo sword. You compare a Hanzo sword with every other sword in the world that's not a Hanzo sword. And what this means is, hell no. We're not going to degrade ourselves to comparing these different pieces of art against each other. When comparing a piece of art, like the LRM Carrier, you compare it to other things, like riflemen, catapults, etc. So we're going to do that with the LRM Carrier. And we're going to pair it with the Demolisher, its natural mate. And then we're going to compare it, replacing the LRM Carrier with a bunch of other common, accepted, really badass DPS support vehicles and mechs. So we're going to consider the SRM Carrier versus LRM Carrier, the Rifleman, a bunch of catapults that are common, Jaeger mech, the Shrek, the Striker vehicle, a Partisan 5, and a Longbow. Those are some pretty common DPS units. As an absolute, the Longbow wins, followed by the catapults and the Riflemen, which are very close to the LRM Carrier. But the LRM Carrier is a lot cheaper in battle value than all of those other units, so it wins when you consider its battle value corrected winning rate. There is in fact only one unit that I know of that can beat the LRM Carrier. And some time ago in one of my previous videos, I mentioned that the Striker is one of my favorite vehicles. Although its absolute win rate is slightly lower, its battle value is cheaper than the LRM Carrier, and its battle value corrected win rate when paired with the Demolisher is actually higher than that of the LRM Carrier. I will do an expose on the pros and cons of the Striker, which is significant in that it has a turret, but it has the disadvantage that it has wheels, so it has trouble with rubble in cities. But that's going to be a topic for a future video, and not now. But for now, let's instead imagine what would have happened had Colonel Kincaid in the Mackie, instead of going up against 4 Merkavas, gone up against a Demolisher and an LRM Carrier. In case you don't know the story of the Mackie was the first mech, and it came out shortly after the Ares Conventions, which enabled, since it put limits on war and the behavior of armies in war, sort of like the Geneva Conventions, it essentially allowed the military-industrial complexes to build up complex weapons like mechs that pretty much probably would not have existed had nukes and total war continued as before during the Age of War. These few screenshots here are the version of the Mackie that I've implemented, which I believe is the original historical Mackie prototype. The only problem is that I am not using a prototype PPC and prototype weapons, which I believe it should have had. So this is sort of a close match. Also, that version of the Mackie, the original prototype, had a single large laser instead of the typical 2 medium lasers in the center torso. Okay, enough with the specs and the speculation. Let's see what actually happened in the simulated battle. Now I'm going to describe how the art of my graphics works, the little ASCII art, so that for future battle replays you can get a good understanding. This is basically, my sims actually have replays built in so you can play back some of the battles. The far top right of the corner says range 20 west, means the target is west, range 20. Right under it is the name of the target, the Demolisher, and under that is F in parentheses followed by F. The F in parentheses is how the enemy is targeting you, and the F afterwards is how you're targeting it. That is, what arcs will you hit. Basically, they're pointing at each other, so it's front. The top left shows the pilot condition, or pilot injuries, and H shows the heat level, which will kind of overwrite the dem target as the heat bars go over. And it'll cross over and change ASCII characters to represent 10, 20, 30, etc. levels of heat. Hopefully the armor diagram is self-evident. I attempt to show some, like the single first weapon mounted in the structure with an L or an M or whatever, depending on if it's a large or a medium, or an S for a small weapon. Based on how much damage it does, I've kind of categorized weapons into smalls, mediums, and larges. Under the legs, there's a PP+, AC+, and LL+. That means the PPC has plus, or means infinite or huge amounts of ammo, has an autocannon that has lots of ammo, or more than 9. And large laser has, of course, more than 9 because it has infinite ammo, so it also shows a plus. And at the very bottom is some text about what the pilot is thinking and doing, or like what the goals of that turn and the next few turns are. This map actually shows after turn 1, and the LRM 20s, only the first 4 characters are shown, so it's LRM 2, and then 7 because it used to have 8 shots and now only has 7 shots left, so it's indicating 7. So that's for the LRM Carrier. And the Demolisher, the AC-20, the first 4 characters shown, then it has lots of ammo, so it has a plus for lots of ammo, or above 9 shots. So turn 1, the Mackie and the Demolisher and the LRM Carriers are all healthy and ready to go, ready to fight. The LRM Carriers pop off a set of shots. The AC-20s of the Demolisher are still out of range, and everyone's closing on each other. So now let's scroll over to the narrative of round 2. I'm going to try to explain the narrative text and how it works. Look down, it's where it says pilot healthy. That's the first line. Then I will go through line by line as I go down. First, I want you to move down to the far bottom left where it's the third pilot healthy. That represents the Mackie pilot. So let's start there and then go on to the Demolisher and LRM Carrier. What is interesting is that the Mackie has chosen to keep at a distance. It's probably trying to keep at a distance from the Demolisher and pick it off with its PPC, whereas the Demolisher and the LRM Carrier have decided to close to get better shots. And where it says enemy unit and with brackets 1, it means the first in the list of enemy units. So both the LRM and the Demolisher target Unit 1 because there's only one Mackie, and the Mackie is targeting the Demolisher, so it's also showing Unit 1 as its enemy target. The next line just shows the current XYZ coordinates. I'm not doing great with the collision avoidance algorithm, so sometimes units might accidentally step into the same coordinates, especially as they're friendly other units. Then I show what the normal move of the vehicle is, and then any damage or motive hit reductions in speed after that. The next following line shows the how much armor and internal structure there are remaining based on the original design. The diagrams show where the hits are, but this is just a total sum of the internal structure and armor. The next line shows what kinds of weapons usage there has been. I don't say what weapon, but I do say how many ballistics, how many energies, how many LRMs, and how many SRMs have been used. And so you kind of have to guess as to whether it was a PPC or a medium laser, but that's just, otherwise it's too much text, so I just simplified it like that. So at the end of turn 2, the Mackie has actually gotten some significant damage in one of its legs, but no one else seems to have been scratched yet, and most of the Mackie is unscratched. Okay, at the end of turn 3, the Demolisher is now in a good position to pop off its shots, so you're seeing ballistics come out of it, whereas the LRMs continue to fly out of the LRM Carrier, and the Mackie is desperately fighting and taking severe damage in its legs. Mackie has been able to hit the Demolisher in the front, and it actually has taken a little bit of damage, but that 0 instead of the O just means less than 50% armor has been removed so far, so the Demolisher is in good shape. Turn 4, the battle continues, mostly as before. The distance is 7 now between the Demolisher and the Mackie, and the LRM is taking advantage of just getting free shots and not getting targeted. Both the Demolisher and the LRM Carrier continue popping off shots. The LRM Carrier is down to only 4 shots per LRM tube at this point, and the Demolisher still has 8 shots per AC-20. The Mackie has been severely mauled in this round and has fallen down. The pilot is attempting to stand up, and it's one of its arms and one of its torsos has also been mangled pretty badly, as well as its one leg barely hanging on by a thread. Demolisher, however, has actually taken serious damage to the front and is down to only a little bit of armor left and is about to go internal, which case the Demolisher will die quickly. Now know that the LRM Carrier is down to only 3 shots per tube, and this again is the main weakness of the LRM Carrier, just lack of ammo. But it doesn't matter, it was enough to blow away the 100-ton Mackie, of course with some significant help from the Demolisher, of course. You can see its head actually got blown right off in this end of round 6, as well as both its arms mangled, its torso's mangled, legs missing. That Mackie has been completely splattered. The LRM Carrier is untouched. This may have appeared like an easy victory for the Demolisher from the LRM Carrier, but not really. The Demolisher almost got killed, and the LRM Carrier was only down to 2 shots per tube, so it's actually a lot closer than it looks. And there you have it. Colonel Kincaid killed, his mech smashed. The Demolisher has taken a beating, and the LRM Carrier is unscathed, ready for a reload and for the next battle.